Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
Thank you. I am proud to rise in support of House Bill 3235B, the Oregon Kids Credit. This bill will invest in Oregon children and families, and especially our Black and Brown communities, our rural communities, and really all of those communities that have been historically intentionally denied the promise of economic opportunity. In 2021, Congress temporarily expanded the federal tax credit as a part of the American Rescue Plan, and the result was historic. Child poverty nationally dropped by nearly half to its lowest rate on record, and the gap in poverty experienced by Black, Indigenous, and Latinx children narrowed significantly. Nearly 9 in every 10 low-income Oregonian families receiving the CTC spent those dollars on basic needs such as food, clothing, shelter, or utilities. But unfortunately, the expanded federal child tax credit expired at the end of 2021, and as a result, an estimated 192,000 children in Oregon lost access to the economic stability it provided and are once again faced with the hardship of slipping back into poverty. And this is an issue because our working families today don't have enough money to provide a safe and nurturing environment for their children, free from homelessness, hunger, or toxic stress. The financial challenges of raising a family are more pronounced for Oregonians of color, where institutional and systemic barriers make it even more challenging to support a family, as well as families in rural communities. Not having these basics such as food, shelter, healthcare, or some of these other fundamental components budgeted for, being able to purchase, inflicts long-term, sometimes irreparable harm on children. And colleagues, I spoke to you about some of this long-term impact on myself and my family earlier this session, the impact of knowing what it's like to have to deal with a budget, knowing what it's like to potentially plan for being hungry, knowing what it's like, especially as a mom now, trying to make ends meet enough for food or for medicine, gives you that little breathing room to be able to focus on homework help, focus on maybe going to the park. These are the components that we're talking about when we're talking about getting at the root cause of poverty and that toxic stress and the relief that this bill could provide. I also want to just re-emphasize some of the components mentioned earlier. The Oregon Kids Credit will provide eligible families a yearly tax credit of $1,000 per child per year. So families making up to $25,000 will receive the full credit, and the credit will phase out for those families making between $25,000 and $30,000 income. The Oregon Center for Public Policy estimates that about 55,000 Oregonian children will be eligible for this Oregon Kids Credit, and about 5,000 of those children will be pulled out of poverty, will be pulled out of this toxic stress, and hopefully given that additional opportunity to not just make ends meet, but thrive in their communities here in Oregon. Analysis by the Oregon Center for Public Policy also finds that the credit will help children living in every corner and in every county of the state, but disproportionately help those living in our rural communities, disproportionately help our Black and Brown communities, our parents, our Black, Indigenous, and Latinx communities as well. This legislative concept was developed in conversation with a number of organizations serving Black, Indigenous, and other Oregonians of color. It was a priority issue for the 2023 Children's Agenda, and I'll also flag a priority issue for our BIPOC legislative caucus. And I would like to thank our co-chief sponsor, Representative Reynolds, and all of the other bipartisan co-sponsors of this bill. Colleagues, this Oregon Kids Credit will strengthen the economic security of families all across the state. It will lift up families of all races in all parts of Oregon and ultimately secure a brighter future for Oregon's children. Members, please join me in supporting Oregon's parents and children and support the Oregon's Kids Credit, HB 3235. I urge an aye vote.